Okay, well, we've got our two clamp pieces in place. Now I found two useful looking ones that still have their low friction surface on them. I'm just going to give both of those a wipe with a bit of molybdenum paste on those surfaces just to give them a flying head start. And see if I can get these into position. If I can figure out where they go. That looks right. Just run those screws loosely down in place. And the other one, just slide that into place because it goes underneath that piece over here, which has the tag on it to connect to the ring on the back of the camera, which couples to the rangefinder on a Retina 3S camera. Now the holes in these two brass crescents are slotted. That means that you can move them about to control the amount of clamp that they apply to the body edge, the ring. Just tighten those lightly up. Check if the focus moves. It does move, but it feels a bit stiff. Slacken those two off. Right, that moves nice and smoothly. I'll tighten those ones up exactly where they are. And check the one on the opposite side. What I'm testing now is to see if there's any rattle, see if there's any flex when I go like this. And I can feel some, so I know that across this point and this point, they're too loose. So if I slacken off those two screws and move those brass crescents out very slightly, I'll check again, see if there's any movement at that point. There still is. I'm trying to keep my adjustments even either side. There's still movement there. In an ideal world, I want it to the stage where there's little or no detectable movement, but the rotation action is nice and smooth still. That feels good in that direction, so I'm checking across these 2 points now. They're pretty good actually. Just check they're tight. Now there's a rough spot there. I can feel it going over a bump. I'm looking to see if I can see any irregularity on the surface here that might account for that. It's something on this side, I think. Well, there's certainly some roughness being felt there. One area you can get friction is if this whole piece is pushed all over to one side, you'll find that this piece is rubbing on the inside of that edge there. I'm just checking that distance there to see if it's even. That's quite good there. Let's just see if I can shift this brass crescent across slightly. Slacken off the other one slightly. That action's nice and smooth, and I've got no rattle, so that's good. Now this piece here is the post that the lens slides into the back of the lens capsule at this point and stops the lens capsule from rotating in the mount. So I'll get that in place. Of course, that also holds that plastic shim, that Teflon shim in place. Well, I can get the screw started. These screws are quite heavily countersunk. They fit down quite firmly into that mount and locate it. Its mate in position. To a large extent, getting this action here running smooth, the focus action running smooth, is the key component here, because that was our number one headline problem, was that the focus was rough. And I'd already decided it wasn't in the focus helical, it was in this mechanism. That's nice and smooth now. I'm checking once again to make sure there's not too much play in the mount. That feels very good. I'll apply a little bit of molybdenum paste onto that surface. Where are we? There will do nicely. Where those brass crescents run, just to give us a little bit more of a flying start there and controlling the friction. That seems to be fine. That should be good. So our mount is good now. I'm happy with that. And I can start assembling the components into the back of the lens, the back of this mount. And of course, I've got to get all these control components back in position. At least I've got everything clean now. Now, one thing I haven't done is I haven't moved my focus scale across from one mount to the other yet. Let's do that. First, I want to check that it looks exactly the same. That looks good. We'll take this scale ring off and put it onto the mount we're using. That was handy. The screw just flew away into the distance. I heard it, but I don't know where it went. I have to do a search for that. Get the first screw in place anyway. Yes, that fits properly, so all I need to do now is find that screw. Fortunately, that screw hadn't gone very far at all. There we have it, our focus scale ring's back in place. And our damaged ring, that can go aside for probably future use. The same with these two pieces which were damaged. I don't throw anything like that out. I've learnt from bitter experience that parts that you'd rejected as being too ugly to be used, at a future date you're exceptionally pleased to see them because they're a hell of a lot better than what you're dealing with at the time. So these components now, I need to start cleaning these control rings to get them back in place. So I'll get these cleaned up and put them in place. There's nothing exciting here, I'm just cleaning these with naphtha and cotton buds. I'll bring you back when it's done. These components have all got, they're all quite thin, but they're all broad flat surfaces. And broad flat surfaces tend to get stuck together if there's any trace of oil or grease in there, which helps them stick. So it's quite important to get all these components clean. So although they don't look like they should be a problem, you can see the oil and dirt that's coming off these. That's enough to make them stick. They just will not move freely on each other if they've got a layer of oil or grease on them like that. They effectively need to be quite dry. Probably in an ideal world they'd be lubricated with graphite or something, but certainly it's a real problem if you get grease on them. Broad flat surfaces tend to just stick together. This piece is the separator that separates the movement of the rings going in opposite directions, which limits the friction that they otherwise would have. The counter-rotating rings potentially can create quite a bit of friction. You don't need much sticking one of these rings at the pointer end, for example, if that's rubbing on the case. Because of leverage with the way the mechanism all works, if there's a problem with one of those pointers, if it's catching on the edge of the case, the whole system jams up. You can push as hard as you like on the lever at the other end of it, but it doesn't want to move anything. Right, so far so good. I'll start assembling these. Right, the first thing I need to do is put back this control ring here. Now that has a little cam on it that runs in this slot. So I'm just putting a touch of molybdenum paste in there and drop this into position. This little tab on here has to run through in a slot under here, so it's a bit of a wriggle to get this in position. Is it going to do it for us? That's it. You can probably see that as I move that ring, you'll see that lever swing backwards and forwards in an arc. That's all running very nicely. Now there's a spring goes on here. In fact, there's two springs. This is the larger diameter of the two springs. It goes on the post. See if I can get that down on the post correctly. That's good. And swings round onto the hook here. That's that. Here's our first pointer. I might need to put that spring on afterwards. Let's have a look. Our first pointer. It's got a slot in it here which couples to that cam over here. Let's get that in position. Like that. That's better. Put our spring back in position. Let's put the spacer in place first. Looking at this here, this is symmetrical. There's spring on the post. And hook to the end of the blade there, the end of the ring. Just checking the action. That seems smooth enough. The other pointer can go on here. This couples to the top gear of that set of gears. And of course that needs its spring too. This is the smaller diameter of the two springs. It's harder to get over the post. That's it. And I'll get that hooked on here first and then lower the ring into position, I think. That's that. I'll get that spring tucked back under. No, I've just disturbed it, it's come off the hook. That's in position. I've got to get that timed correctly with the gear because it's miles away from where it should be. That's good. So both of my pointers are up hard against the ends of their stops. So as they counter rotate, they should meet towards the centre. That looks okay. And the last of our control rings is this one here. That sits this way around, I think. Here. And all this requires is the focus mount section for the back of the lens, which I've got to take apart, clean, make sure that the rangefinder coupling here runs smoothly. At the moment it's a little bit sticky. I need to make sure that runs smoothly, and we can couple these two pieces together. 3 screws hold these tabs in place. And all that's required here is to make sure that this is clean, free from dust and grit. See the cotton bud's coming off fairly dirty. It's by no means a bad example. I just need that all clean in there so that that part will move smoothly with minimal resistance. I need to lubricate that lightly because if it's dry it tends to chatter. As you try and revolve it, it tends to chatter, so it makes for a rough feel for the focus. The cam surface under here, I'm just running a bit of molybdenum paste on that. And we'll see how that runs. That's alright, that's good. There was enough sort of spillover with my molybdenum paste that it's lubricated that quite well. It's running smoothly. It hasn't got the dry chatter that they have if they're dry, particularly if they're dry and dusty as well. I'll just get these three plates back in place with their fixing screws. You're probably wondering about the shape of these parts and whether there's any special reason for that notch in there. Well, there is, but not on this particular lens. On other lenses there's a screw hole that comes through very near the position of this, and that notch just allows clearance for that screw. On this lens there's no such screw, so there's no such need for the notch. Lucky last. I think my tweezers have become magnetised. It's getting hard to get things to stay where I put them. Right, that's our 3 screws. I'll just check the action of that ring. Yeah, it seems smooth enough. Yep, that's good. I need to make these components up now. Well, I can probably get away without too much hard work here. On some of these lenses you have to put a shim in here, and locating the shim is a bit tricky. On this particular lens I don't have to worry about that. So all I've got to do is couple this tab here with the slot in the mount here. So I just need to get those, know where that is in terms of alignment. If I line it up with this hole here, I can tell exactly where it needs to be. I should be able to drop those 2 components together. At least that's the theory. Something's not dropping in. That's it, it's just picked up. Now I need to check to see if my levers move smoothly. This is the one for my depth of field pointers. I'm just checking that they come together in the centre correctly. They do. The other one is loose, that just does the diaphragm on the lens itself, which of course at the moment is not in here. So I'll get the 4 screws in the back here. And check the action again to make sure that the focus moves smoothly. Make sure that the depth of field pointers move smoothly. And that the coupling for the lens diaphragm moves smoothly. And if they're all good, I can turn my attention to the lens capsule. And see what that needs. I've already identified that the diaphragm appeared to have some oily patches on it, and I want to clean those before the lens goes back together. Well, that's good. I'm checking the focus. There's some rubbing sound there. I'm just trying to figure out where that's coming from. And if it's something that I should be concerned about. I'm looking closely at the spacing around here to see if the outside diameter of this component is rubbing on the inside of that groove, or that the depth of field pointers are touching the focus scale. Now I think that feels smooth now. I think that's good. I'll check those 4 screws. Check that there's no rattle in the mount. It's a little bit there. I'll just try that, moving that adjustment. Move this one out. Try moving that in, that one out. Now that seems good now. Right, well that seems pretty good. My depth of field pointers aren't as snappy as I'd expect them to be. Just check. But one of the springs is rubbing on something. I'll open that back up, see what I can find out. With the focus mount moving smoothly, I've just got to turn my attention to the lens block here, really, the capsule. Now I need to remove the rear group from here and the front group so I can get to the diaphragm and clean it. I think a friction tool might do this. Yep, that's got the front group loose. And the rear group, I'll try the same. Yep, that's come loose too. That gives me access to the interior surfaces of the lens. I'm not expecting to have to get in and clean in between the interior surfaces, just the innermost and outermost surfaces. And I want to clean that diaphragm lightly, and for that I'll use some naphtha. Now normally I would disassemble the diaphragm in order to clean it, but these ones are very, very awkward. There's 5 blades, if you like, but each blade consists of 2 parts. They are not easy to reassemble. So I'll just clean them in situ. There's no obvious problem with how this diaphragm is moving or working. The marking on the blades is more of a cosmetic problem than anything else. It's working fine. But I'd be much happier if that oil that was, or those oil marks that were on those blades were not there. I'd be much more confident that it'll continue to work well for years to come. That's coming up well. Well, I've probably skipped a few stages that you didn't see. I have my lens capsule back in. The diaphragm is all cleaned now. I've cleaned the glass front and rear, and I've adjusted the focus. Now, to adjust the focus on this lens, I've used my Retina Reflex 4 body, which I had handy and which is, of course, all preset and ready to go. And I'll put the lens in that. And basically, because the camera is correctly adjusted, I can just use the focus screen in order to set the focus. So setting the focus is a simple matter. There are 3 screws here, here and here, and you simply slacken those up and you move your focus scale ring relative to the outer helical to ensure that when the focus scale ring comes round to the infinity position, that an infinity target in fact is correctly focused on the screen, or in this case with the split image you can tell pretty promptly whether your focus target is correctly focused. And once you've got that position correct, it's a simple matter to tighten up the 3 screws, and all that's required then is to put back the front piece here, which is the filter mount, or it's sort of forms a short hood on this lens to tell the truth. And then we've got our tapered, our conical section in here which screws in and holds that in place. So all I need to do is use a friction tool, run that down, tighten it up, and there's my lens. Focus is nice and smooth. The infinity focus is correct. The diaphragm opens and closes smoothly. The diaphragm blades themselves are nice and clean. No obvious oil staining there. That action's nice and smooth. Depth of field pointers. They work smoothly. Meet in the centre, so that's all good, and that lens can go back to its owner now. And to tell the truth, I'm not even sure what sort of camera he's using this one on, but he should find it much easier to use now. The focus is just nice and smooth. That's just great. It took a bit of mucking around to get that to go, and our main problem of course was the state of this component and that exceptionally rough area down here where the brass guides, these wedge shaped pieces, would run on, and that was just very chewed up. It had obviously galled up. It must have had something caught there, but a bit of grit, something like that, had been caught in there and was just grinding backwards and forwards as the focus was swung backwards and forwards. And that surface is just a mess. Potentially you could clean that up, I expect, with a bit of wet and dry, but you'd never get it dead level. It wouldn't be as smooth or as even as it should be. So replacing this component was really the only practical answer for this lens. But now it all works smoothly, and yeah, it should be a good one. So thanks for watching.